Yeah, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:07. And our roll call.
Okay. Member Joanne Roberts. Member Stephen Martino.
Here.
Member John Chamberlain. Member Richard Benecke.
Here.
Chair Steve Cooley.
Here.
Treasurer Sharon Geiser.
Here.
Councilmember Santos.
Here.
And we know Mayor Carroll won't be here.
Okay, let's move on to our pledge of allegiance. We'll all stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then looking at the agenda we have now, doing any adjustments, any changes to it, or is it good as it stands? Nobody has any comments, so we'll move along on that. And again, we should ask if we have any conflicts of interest on the information that is on the agenda. Anybody? Okay. At that point in time, I think we can move on to the next item, which is the adoption of the minutes from the last meeting.
Did you have a meeting in December?
Yes,
These are minutes from November?
yes, she's one behind.
Okay, so these are not the last meeting's minutes, or the meeting minutes of November.
November
Correct.
6th.
Move to approve.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so that passes and is off the agenda now. The next thing on the agenda is an appointment of a vice chair. And we do need a vice chair, somebody to step in when the chair is not here and to take over as the chair at the end of the year. Considering that we have two people, is anybody willing to step up and volunteer for that, or should we carry it over until next time, hoping we have a few more members? And I suspect we may even have some new members by then. I believe it's on the city council for the next meeting. So I'm proposing, if no one objects, we carry that selection of a vice chair over to our next meeting.
Doesn't bother me.
Anybody object? Okay, then we'll do that. Then
Just don't get sick.
so then that moves us down to the policies and procedures manual. I assume everybody's had an opportunity to see that. You want to go ahead and
Sure.
give us your little overview on it?
Sure. This is exactly what we've spent the last 6 months going through, one piece at a time, and now it's organized into 5 chapters. So they are exactly what we've already discussed, and so I put them together so that we can make a recommendation, if the committee so feels, for City Council to accept it, and then we can begin considering sections to add to it, or edits if we find more things that we want to refine or change as we move forward.
Okay, I have been through this quite extensively. I'm very happy with it. I think it meets all the requirements that this can meet of any of the findings that we've had in the past. I think it clearly outlines who will do what, when, and where. And of course, some things could change as new staff positions are added or new employees, but I think what we have covers the needs very well. And in my opinion, I think it's ready to move on to the city council and see if we can get it implemented. Anybody have comments, questions?
I have a comment on that. I mean, on this, Lana, on the timeliness on the report.
Yes.
And it says there, your monthly revenue and everything, that will be, third day of the following. That will be on a cash basis. I just like to clarify that on a cash basis. And then we have the accrual, and I know, I asked you this before, And they'll be, will be done on September. So it means we have the report on the council on the September 30th on that.
Right, so it would be, the way that I had it in my mind is that for June, on September 30th, I should be done with it.
Yes.
So the first meeting of October, it comes to Finance Committee to review. And if there's any changes, edits, or whatever, and then the second meeting of the City Council in October, they would get the June report as well. So that committee gets it first, then not the next night, because that's hard to turn around like that, but then the next council meeting after that, I would present the financial information that this committee had already reviewed. And so on the page numbers didn't show up.
It
It'll
is
be
your-
5. I numbered, so if you count back, including the title page, it'll be
They
in
were
5.
there originally, so, so I did put that in there, just like timelines, but I did say cash basis and accrual basis, just so that we have it clarified.
That's very, very good. I mean, also on the audited financial, I mean, that will be really on time. That will be done on February
Right,
for the council.
right.
And then this committee could review that or could see that audit prior to that, right?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
It won't happen for fiscal 17 because we're just now, we just awarded that audit contract, so that there's no way that we'll have
No,
that in February. But
I agree.
Going forward, that is the plan. That is the plan, that we
No, I
meet
like
all
how
of
you're
these
scheduling.
timelines.
I like the scheduling.
Okay.
Now, on the availability of reports and informations, I know it's confidential and everything on the employees' information.
Yes.
And my question is not questions, it's my comment on the business sales information. What are those
Business sales,
informations?
business sales?
Yeah, you put it in there. It's employee home and address, telephone numbers, employee earnings information, and
Oh,
then
business sales.
sales information.
If we were to have any kind of reports, which we do get on a quarterly basis from HDL, it talks about sales of different businesses that were filed with the state of California on their sales tax returns. It does comparisons, and we get a lot of
Okay.
information that way. That's not, that's because it's proprietary and belongs to them. We aren't allowed to share that information.
Okay. I'd like to clarify that. I mean,
Okay.
For a way of information, I did look up these dates for the initial closing being September 30th and the council meeting in February. Puts us right smack dab in the middle of most of the cities and towns throughout the United States. There are a couple that are really fast. They're real outliers, and of course there are some that are years past, and we're no longer in that. So I think we're right smack dab in the middle. I think the dates look good.
Yeah, they seem reasonable with the
Yes.
size of the city and the type of funding that we deal with and the accounting issues we have. So if we just keep everything, stay on top of everything consistently, we should not have any problems with it.
And then next comment is sorry about this, man. I mean, the responsible personnel, and I know this is excellent. I mean, we will have a formal training are used to develop and retain necessary employee skills. My thing on that, do we have any schedules of training, especially on a certain level of employees that, let's say, the technicians coming in the office and everything? Is there any schedule for that? I mean, and also the protocols on our policy and procedures?
Right, we haven't done anything formalized for continuing education for the finance staff yet. That's one of the things that I've been looking at. I was looking at some of the specific courses that are available for state of California finance. And I was actually talking to one of the staff about it just last week, is we're trying to find the availability of some of these through webcasts and webinars, because a lot of them are done in Sacramento, and that's just a cost that just
It
doesn't make sense. So we're looking for different ways of doing that, and then I'll sit down with our Director of Administrative Services, and we'll come up with an education policy. My intention is that we try and have something done quarterly, and one of the staff comes back, and at our regular internal meeting, then they do a presentation to the rest of us so that we're all up to date and up to speed on what they've learned, or if there's something really important coming, a change coming, then and we'll do something a little more extensive. But that's kind of my idea right now.
No, that's excellent.
Okay.
I mean, that's very good.
Does GASB have a requirement for that?
Well, my CPA license does.
Yeah, I know, but I know GASB has a requirement for training for government auditors. I don't know if
Yes.
it's for staff.
It's not. It's for the auditors.
Okay.
But this month is the annual GASB update. Woo! So I am attending that.
That's good.
It's exciting. It's always very exciting to sit through.
Yeah, well, since this is, you know, these policies and procedures, a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort has gone into evaluating these, coming up with them, shoring up the leaky dam, so to speak. And I know it's a work in progress, and as we move along and you get more experience of working with these policies and procedures, you will come up with some ideas for maybe tightening them a little bit, or
Oh, sure.
maybe an idea wasn't there that does come up that needs to be there. I just want to make sure that through, I don't know, an annual review of this policy or a semi-annual review, that maybe we're given that opportunity to take a look at, you know, I don't want to be nickel and dimed. I think a lot of things will come up that,
Right.
that you'll be able to work with. But maybe at some point in time, either biannually or annually, we take a look at the changes that you made, and the reasons why you made those changes.
Yes. And I don't know where, but I thought I had that in here somewhere, that we would do an annual review. I just don't know where.
You probably did.
I may have squished it. It could be. Let's see it now.
No, don't worry about it now. But
Okay.
I just want to make sure it's something of that nature is in there so that,
Okay, I will make sure, but I know I talked about it and I thought I did, but I will look for it and make sure that it's included. But yeah, on at least an annual basis.
that's good. Thank you. I'll move to recommend to the,
I have another comment.
yeah, okay.
I just like to, you know, be updated and also clarify in my mind. Is this a part of the, you know, on the by fund, by department, and by account number? That page in there. On number 6, it says in there the summary of, or in detail, is the project activity report. If you, probably that's the last page or the second. Am I looking at that?
The,
Financial reports that are prepared?
or on the chart of accounts.
Yeah, it says a summary or in detail on the periodic journal entries.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, on the item number 6 in there, does it interlink or any interconnected to each other on item annual? On number 4, grant act, the accruals or the deferrals, land transactions, and up to line item 9 on the same page.
Right. No, those are all manually determined and
Okay.
entered. A lot of that has to do with determining timing.
Uh-huh.
So it would be, is it something that we need to have included as a deferral? Do we need to make sure we have it there? And the capital asset transactions, those will be recorded as we go along.
Yes.
As an expense line item, because that's how we budget. Then a year in, then it will be pulled out and added to the fixed asset list. So that'll only happen on an annual basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. On that side, on the project, you know, project activities on that. So we'll be doing the CFD in there too. I mean, will be you know, available. The any balances in there.
Oh,
or
yes. Yes,
any transactions on the CFD.
Yes.
Does the public will have access on that, or we only us?
Oh, no, the CFDs are set up in their own fund as well. So when we do the transactional reports, when we have the general ledgers and the financials, all of the CFD activities are there as well. The one part that's a little bit tougher is when you take the CFD and you have to break it down by specific improvement areas,
Yeah, right.
by the 4 different funds. That is something that you have to do analysis on, like May, because of the timing of the payments and determining the debt service that's due with each improvement area to make sure none of them are short funded. And if we have to do some moving of capital improvement money in to make a debt service payment if one of the improvement areas is short. But we have delinquency reserves. We set those during fiscal 16, 17. So we should be okay. We shouldn't have any shortfalls. And as far as I know, there haven't ever been any, but we did set up the delinquency reserves just in case. But those CFDs will also all be reported just like everything else.
Very good. Very good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. With regards to the CFD and not the facilities, but the service fees that are collected separately, do we track those by assessment or improvement area also?
We do.
And do we correlate the collection of those service fees along with the expenditures in each area?
That's a little bit harder because of the way the CFD actually was structured. The expenditures, we're still working on some specific ways to determine how much is spent in each specific area. Some things we know that are direct costs for a specific area, and we know what those are. But we're working on figuring out, how much time is it? It's staff time, which isn't tracked that way. It's just, they work all day. So, but no one's ever said, oh, well, I've spent 3 hours a week in improvement area 14A, and then I spend 12 hours a week in 8C, or, it's not been done that way. So we're still working on ways to improve that, and that actually is one of the higher priorities on my list of things to get figured out. We're working with Bob in the Community Services Department. We're working with some of our consultants, trying to come up with ways to make sure that we nail down how we're capturing those costs. And I've set up these codes, these sub-account codes. So it's 3 digits, 4 digits, 4 digits, 4 digits. That last 4 digits is to account for specifically the parks, and then also specifically for improvement areas. So if we know that we've got an invoice coming across and it's for something that we know is going to be spent in Seneca Springs, that we know it gets coded to that improvement area. So we're starting to change the way people think so we can start capturing that kind of information at that level. It's a lot of detail that no one's really thought about before.
Very good.
Do we have any federal grants that are requiring that currently?
Fiscal 17 will not require a single audit, although we are expecting some FEMA money for reimbursement after the heavy rains last year and some of the damage that was done. But as Potrero Interchange gets off the ground, maybe not fiscal 18, I can keep my fingers crossed, but if we don't expend enough in federal money, then it won't be required yet. Guaranteed fiscal 19 will require a federal audit.
And obviously you're aware that we're going to need to plug that in, so.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Whole new level of requirements.
Now, on the annual financial statements, I'd just like to clarify this. It says the wording in here will be, any audit will do is the city's auditors. Is it internal or external?
External.
Okay.
We don't have an
I
internal
know.
audit staff.
I just like to clarify that because it shows in here, and that's why I
Right.
put it in here, external auditor, a big question mark on my side.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Got it. But yeah, definitely external audit.
okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you. It's
Any
very
other
good,
comments?
very good.
Okay, I think we had a motion to accept this draft and pass it on to city council. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Anybody, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so be it, we'll do that.
Woohoo. All right. I will have this on the city council agenda for next week. I'll have it on there.
All right,
Milana,
Yes.
good job.
Thank you.
I second that.
Finally, we got this, man. This is great.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is the internal control findings and software update.
Okay. So let's see if I can do this. Probably not. No, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
This is, there it is. Wahaha. When I do this. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, the software.
Act.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
We don't have it here, so.
The question came up in our meeting last month and also with City Council about how does the software actually meet some of the internal control requirements that the city has? I could have sworn I just did that. Oh, try again. And the answer to that is it gives us better oversight. We have approval thresholds. A person can't just edit an entry without someone else having it. We have audit logs that can be generated. If we want to see who changed what last, we can do that as well. Once it's posted, it can't be deleted. There is no delete, even though sometimes I really kind of wish there was. Instead, you have to do a new journal entry or whatever to reverse it and fix it, and sometimes it gets a little messy. But and then also, as I said, oversight, being able to have all the directors have the ability to look at their numbers. They can drill down into the detail to figure out which vendor has even been paid if there was an invoice. They are approving the invoices for payment to start with, so they should be able to see them once they do post to their expense accounts. They can see it checked against their budget, and they can maintain their operational oversight with that. That's the biggest improvement is really that oversight. Any questions can come to finance. We can look it up. We can see if we've made a posting error. We can find out if the budget was just improperly done. The other thing we have now is purchase orders, so we can control the big costs, and we have them set in a way that if somebody's invoice comes in and it's greater than that purchase order, the system won't allow us to pay it because it's in excess of the purchase order. And so it has to come back to council in order to have that bumped up. There's only one person who has the authorization at the city council level to approve a purchase order, and that is not me. That is our deputy city clerk. So if it's in the minutes and it's occurred, then the next morning when she's in the office, she actually goes ahead and approves those because they're waiting for her. There's also a level of approval for those for city manager and the directors themselves. And then I also have a sign off on every purchase order as well. If the sign offs are not there, then it can't be paid. It just will not process it. Same with our projects. When we set up a project, it has a threshold in every budget line item. You can't exceed them. So if we say something's going to cost $200,000 and somebody tries to process a requisition or a purchase order for $205,000 for that project, it won't let you. They have hard ceilings, hard caps on them. So anything that looks like it's going to kind of go right over the edge, it stops it, so that it does have to come back to council, be discussed with city manager, whatever, depending on what it is. So there's a lot of controls that way. And then we also are keeping our staff segregated so that we don't have the person who's taking in the money also posting it in the bank reconciliation. We don't have the person who's printing checks be the person who is also responsible for doing the upload of the positive pay to the bank. We've segregated it as much as we can so that we don't do any crossover of things like that. So, the software has been a huge improvement because we now have so much capability, so many different functionalities, and we can segregate things in a logical manner, even with a small staff, and it helps a great deal. So I have it up on the screen. This is live. This is stuff I probably haven't done today that I should, but that's okay. And what we were looking at before, I was trying to come up with a way to really tie this into what the state controller's office found in their findings, but they had every finding. So it's, having a way to integrate all the different functions for better oversight, really just in general, will take care of a lot of the state controller's office. And then also with our auditors and their findings. A lot of the auditors are more specific, day-to-day, real-time things that happen with the city, but the big overarching issues are going to be really solved with the software itself. Having ongoing training, just making sure everybody understands how things are supposed to be run, making sure that we get the right people in the right positions is about 90% of the battle to make things work properly. So with this committee, I didn't know how much detail you wanted to look at, or if there's anything specific that you wanted to look at, or if you just wanted to talk in more broad terms with some of the findings that we've had, and maybe more specifics of the software if there's something you wanted to see. It's hard to have a presentation of it because it could go so many different directions. So I just didn't want to presume anything, and I thought I would leave it open to the committee members.
Okay, I'm looking at the City of Beaumont software implementations that improve internal controls. Okay. And then there's an inset. Software solution includes various components. And it says on number 2, cash receipts. Software utilized by the city is a Tyler Technology product, but an older version. This is what's currently being done, and we're in the process of converting over to the new. Is that correct?
We have taken version 8 and we've taken the first step. We now are up to version 9. We're almost there. Version 10 is their highest level. Version 9 is where we're at now. And we now have the capability that, I don't know if this is going to be where you can actually see it. I hope you can, but this is the packets that are in the system that I need to go through and approve. All of these that say import Envision general ledger entries, and there's a ton of them. These are now automatically coming into the software from this version 9. They have a converter software that is on the hosted system, so we have no control over it at all. It takes the information that's been input by each of the cashiers during the day. When they close their batch, it goes into these conversions, and then it appears as a packet in the general ledger software. So these are the packets that the general ledger software has generated. And we just go through these and we determine what needs to be posted, or if there's an error in the batch, we can go back to the original documentation that came with it. There is a daily packet from each cashier every single day. So sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, and we're catching up on getting some of these posted. We have to determine the difference between cash receipts and utility billing and billing adjustments because they need to be reviewed differently. But the cash receipt ones are being posted by the staff person who was responsible for actually re-entering them all each day. So this is much easier for her just to go through, look at it, make sure everything's in the right account numbers, and then she posts it. She doesn't have to re-enter it anymore. So we've taken that first step from that cashiering software version 8. We're now at version 9. And the very last update that we'll be doing with the entire software implementation, the very last piece is moving cashiering to version 10.
Okay. And so our contract is the version 10.
It is.
And it's being implemented
Right.
in what appears to be a reasonable manner. Yeah.
Right. It'll be last. Right now we're working on the full implementation and integration with Intergov, which is another one of their software products, which will automatically integrate with our cash receipting and with the general ledger. And it has to do with, I know I'll do this wrong, but it's business licenses, planning, building and safety, so building permits, developer impact fees, public work projects, all of those things where they issue permits or they have fees against things that they review or whatever they have. That's what that piece is, and it can track those individual by track number or however they best keep track of it. And then it'll automatically integrate now with the general ledger. Instead of entering a cash receipt in the system, and then we re-enter it in the GL, and then the planning department re-enters it over in their software. Instead of re-entering the same thing 3 times, we're now going to have an integration, and that's the piece we're working on having active by the end of January. And that will certainly solve a lot of, if nothing else, key punch errors. The more times you touch it, the more likely you're going to make a mistake. So we're
Do we
trying to
have a
get all
guesstimate of when this will be fully implemented?
all pieces to the very, very end. I would like it to probably be the end of March. So
okay.
it might fall into April. But if we can get this big piece integrated now. That one is huge. And then I think our utility billing and then the cashiering software, I think, will be relatively quickly done after that.
So it should all be in before the end of the fiscal year.
That is my
Realizing there are
objective, yes.
there are always
Always.
other people, other companies and things that have an impact on that.
Yes.
Quick question, is the vendor for the software services, are they on an annual contract? Do they include updates automatically, or do we have
Yes.
to renew each year?
We have annual user fees, but it is at a locked-in cost, and we locked it in on a 7-year term when it first started because we knew this was going to be a long-term process.
So that automatically includes newer revisions? As they
Yes.
come out, they upgrade it as it flows into it, and any patches to the software are automatically included?
They actually happen overnight. I'll come in and be like, oh, I hope this patch doesn't make it worse. I hope it makes it better. But it is a hosted environment, so everything will be moved to their servers. In fact, they are now, with just a few exceptions, so that all of the management of the servers and the data, and then, of course, then all of the software upgrades for all of their different products is done by them. And it's a constant mechanism. So it's great that we know that we're always at the highest level of their software.
And we have a date certain when that contract ends, so we'll have an opportunity to review
Yes,
to see if we're going to continue with them or another vendor.
right.
What are their security protocols, and what kind of backup you have on the system?
They have all the backups.
They maintain all the data?
Yes, on their servers. So they have, and I made sure they have redundant backups so that they're good on that side. And then they have the password security that goes from our computers to theirs. They control that password. I don't even know what that is. They won't tell me. They set it up when I tell them who the new users will be. Then we set up another username and password so that once they're in the server, they can then get in the software. So it's a dual level.
In your 7-year contract, assuming you don't renew with them, I'm sure it's in the contract, because no one would sign a contract without it being in there, but I'm gonna have to ask a question anyway. In the contract, do you have proprietary control over the data they have, so that if you elect a new vendor after 7 years, they have to transport that data into the new vendor?
Yes, the data is ours.
You own
Absolutely.
the data, they're just securing it for you as part of the contract.
Right. It
And
within their
as a backup.
database program, manipulating it in a way for reporting and such. But the data itself, that's ours.
Okay, and in your operation, how many people have total access to this system? I mean, how many people have been trained to totally access this system? In other words, how many people know this system inside out and can work with it on a day-to-day basis, no matter who's in the office or whatever?
Different departments have different access depending on what their functions are. So I would think if you want to talk about having the most access to all of it and having a broader understanding of how all the different pieces come together is probably in finance, only because as they implement a new piece for this department or that department, we need to know how it's going to feed into the general ledger. So we have the capability of going and looking at every piece. Each individual department is probably a little more concerned with just what it is that serves their purpose. None of the other directors or analysts probably have an understanding of how general ledger works, but they do have access to see what their numbers are. So they know actual versus budget. They know how to understand that. So they know how to look that up.
So within the departmentalization of this whole database concept, obviously there are backup people. I mean, if somebody gets sick or somebody transfers or leaves and it takes you 6 months to hire somebody else, they can still function, putting their piece into the puzzle.
Yes, absolutely.
The overall, though, to massage the data, manipulate the data, and I use that in a positive term for reports and everything. You have to
Right.
manipulate the data.
Right.
Who's that person or persons?
With the financial software, that's probably between myself and the senior accounting technician. We're the ones who are doing we're doing the reporting and
Do you feel that's sufficient to handle
at this time.
And at this time.
Plus, our city manager has a really good grasp of how the financials should work. So, I mean, in a worst case, he could probably figure out how to move things to the place it needs to be, you know, with some understanding of what the end result needs to look like. So
It's a great system, has a lot of functionality, has a lot of integration. It also has a lot. I mean, there's a lot there, so.
right,
In terms of these reports and everything like that, they're only as good as the information we get out of the system.
right,
They're
and
only as good as the information going into the system, so you gotta make sure that pieces of the puzzle there. And it sounds like you've done a great
Right.
job,
yeah,
I'm just double checking.
it's always true that garbage in, garbage out. And so one of the things that I always try to do, and especially here, is no snap decisions. No snap, it needs to look like this. Instead, I try to find out what's useful. I mean, I know what the standards say, but sometimes you need it just a little differently in order to make it make sense to that end user. And so I'm trying to be sensitive to that as well.
Technician that has the same skill set as you do, he's under the same sensitivity that you are to having this data entered correctly and everything. I mean,
Yes,
okay.
yes. She's actually, I have her doing a lot of reconciliations of data and then comparing it to how it gets reported to make sure that, you know, what's actually the actual documents is how it's reflected so that it's all understood and it all flows.
Good,
So,
good. That makes me feel very comfortable.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. You don't have the ability to change data put in by other departments, correct?
correct. Although I don't really let them do too much as far as entry, only because if they make journal entries and mess it up, I'd be very unhappy.
Yeah.
But they do have the ability to see anything
Yes.
that is applicable to their department. I've set it up in a way so that community service can see anything related to community service, but they can't see public safety. Public safety can't see community development, but they can see all the public safety. To try and, you know, you need to focus on what you need to focus on, and don't worry about the others. You know, that's not within your purview. So,
The clarity I was looking to put here is that you or the senior accountant cannot create data. You can approve it or request somebody else to implement, but you couldn't go in and look at, let's say, an entry of X number of dollars cash that was input by some cashier and say, no, that's wrong, it's not $1 million, it should be 200,000, and walk away with it. That is what the software
right, I can't.
protects from happening.
Right, I can't change it unless it hasn't been posted, and that's my review process. So somebody else enters it, I review it, and I either approve it for entry or not, but I'm actually never touching the cash.
Right.
So, and when I enter things, I make someone else review my entries and approve them. So we, you know,
So there's
try and keep it
not
all
one person that can control
right,
it can control the whole thing.
right,
I just wanted that to be clear.
yes,
That's an important point, because that's how this whole thing is set up.
right.
You don't want one person to get there, whoever it may be, and, you know.
Then the last question,
Mm-hmm.
does this vendor provide services for the city's IT department? Do they run risk tests, or is the city responsible to ensure that our system from the city to the vendors is secure?
That's on us. So that's on us to make sure that we have the proper firewalls, that we have the proper technical stuff that keeps people from being able to break into the system and take data or anything like that. So that's on us, but once it gets to them, then it's on them.
But this is all network based, right? It's all
Right.
login? Okay.
Right. Right, and it is, like I said, it is maintained on their servers. So we have no control over the software itself. We only have the data entry and reporting capabilities.
And passwords are changed how often?
6 months.
6 months.
Any other questions on this? I'm not sure that this report needs to be moved and handed on anywhere. I think this was primarily for our understanding.
Right. It's informational only because, there's always so much concern with the internal controls and as we get caught up on all of the findings and we get through the timing of it, just knowing that this software is part of the correction of internal control problems.
I'd like the minutes to note that this was received, reviewed, and filed, just as an action item.
Okay, and we can ensure that, correct? All right, so that is there. The last little bit on this is SCO findings and status update. There are 3 of the findings that are in this report, and I think they rather clearly explain where we're on for that.
Can I have a quick question? I mean, comment on the internal control. I know we've been doing you're excellent on the accounting, and then we're doing the finance now. And on the, I'm always on the project accounting, and you mentioned that in there. And is this will be integrated on the accounting side to do a project like Potrero? And then we have the man-hour and everything in there, the admin fees, and can we, I don't want to see an overrun on a project, just like the senior. I mean, if I look in there, I mean, I like to be on the council, seeing that every time we want to see a project, a certain given period, that we're on the target. Not an overrun. I mean, I don't want to be surprised, especially the public. I mean, to show a overrun on that. That's why when I saw this on the project accounting, if I integrate everything in here, the system design, man, I mean, I didn't know that you have that in there.
Yes.
But it's not utilized yet, or
We have, what I have on the screen is, there are 3 projects listed there. Just to try and give you just a few. These are projects that have been set up. One is the Potrero interchange. One is the Oak Valley. Maybe I'll make it a little wider so I can actually read it. I don't know if you guys can even see it. Is it too small to actually see?
no?
Okay. The Oak Valley I-10 interchange traffic signals.
Yeah.
And then the 8th Street sidewalks. 8th Street sidewalks is a CDBG that doesn't count. But,
So it's live.
but yeah, so if we look at these projects, so we'll look at the Oak Valley one. Only because it has a little bit less activity. It's budgeted from our CIP budget to have a revenue of $650,000. Of that, we've already transferred $360,000 into it. Right this second, I couldn't tell you where that's from, but it has been transferred. And we have costs. The cost is supposed to be $650,000 total, and to date, we have about $250,000 incurred, and we still have a budget remaining for those costs of $402,000. So we can go into the detail of any of these. Oh, and set the timing. We can set it to have only 1 year, 3 years, 7 years, do the whole thing. And we can go through and see how much was transferred and where it came from, how much the costs were, and who they were paid to. We can see everything.
What about
for
the
this
date of
project.
completion? Sorry to interrupt you.
On this one, it's set by the person who sets up the project. So this one, it's set up with a date of completion in December of 2018. So if the costs weren't completed by December of 2018, say we get something in January of 2019, we've already discovered it won't let you enter it unless you go through and you edit the dates of the project, because it's saying, no, your project's supposed to be done. Too bad for you.
Okay.
And then, but all of these budgetary and timeframes are set up from the CIP budget that was approved by City Council. And if they're going to be changed, it has to go to City Council first.
So to clarify.
Good.
We're talking about budget overruns, and since the purchase orders, if the purchase order exceeds, it can't be paid.
Correct.
Same thing with the budget overrun.
It
Software
stops
will
it.
prevent that. It may
Right.
have to be adjusted by the city council or something.
Right.
But as far as the software, it's going to stop
Right.
that from occurring.
And the way that happens
automatically.
is this little general tab, there is a a line item that says budget checking message and it says error, I have the ability to change that drop down so nobody else can. It says error because that's the hard ceiling. And that way it's not a, you get a warning and you click past it and you keep going anyway. Error actually stops the process and nobody has the ability to change that particular box.
Is there a tracking or method for looking at projects, for instance, the majority of the cost might be tied to consultants and construction costs? Usually.
Correct.
So when you're looking at that, is there a developed schedule of values that matches the duration schedule where you can see peaks and low points and when there's going to be expenditures based upon the construction that's done? And that it gives you the ability to project cash flow for budget and expenditures, and so that somebody doesn't get, isn't invoicing per their contract ahead of work performed in the field?
Right. Gets a little loopy on us. We have project engineers, and their responsibility is to maintain those timelines and make sure that the work is done before it's invoiced. Right now, as far as getting the project set up, I can put the budgets in on the timelines, but we don't have the time and the staff to actually dedicate to making it that specific in the software. That's one of the things I would love to have is another staff person that is just doing project accounting and can work with each one of those project engineers and keep a really tight control on their budgets, getting the cash flow reined in correctly. We have one project where we have some of the money now, but we're not going to have the rest for 4 more months. We need to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves and that kind of thing. And so I think it would take somebody who's diligent and able to really pay attention to that on a continuous basis to keep everybody in line as these projects start taking off.
When you're referencing a project engineer, as the project engineer for the GC that's actually doing the work, or is it a project engineer that we contract with?
That we contract with.
Separate
Or
from the
as
GC?
internal staff. We have a little bit of both as we're getting everything off the ground. So
That validates their invoicing, okay.
absolutely. And some of them are going to be tied to grants. So that becomes absolutely critical. I mean, you cannot let those drop or you miss those windows to get the reimbursements on a timely basis. So, it just becomes really, really important.
Okay, then I think let's move on to the next item, which is the financial reports for the month that we've requested. We have copies of those? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is where I start getting this off the ground and doing this consistently. This is our first meeting in January, so I am providing you with financials through November. So these are the reports that we had talked about having on a consistent monthly basis. So the first couple of pages are the ones that also will go to council. So it's the general fund where we do the year-to-date against budget, and then the general fund where we compare this year to last year, where we're at. And then we do the same thing for the wastewater fund.
Okay, I think just to give us a quick run-through, can we just run through the total revenues, the total expenses, and the transfers on this first report?
Yes. Okay, so this is the general fund, and we have total revenues budgeted of $25.6 million. Year to date for the 5 months, we've brought in $6.5 million. So we're short for the year so far at $19 million, a little over $19 million, which is typical at this point in time. Our first big tax wire that comes in January, so it doesn't come in month to month. So we're going to look like we're behind until those big tax payments start rolling forward, and then we'll have that catch up. If you look at you look at the next one to see this November compared to last November to see if we're in about the right place. But this tells you that against our budget it looks like we're very, very behind, but it's a typical cycle for revenue recognition. The expenses, we have $31.2 million, there we go, in expenses budgeted, and year to date we're at just almost 11 million. That leaves us a remaining amount of 65% of our budget. And on the front page in the staff report, I was saying that if you get 5/12, we should have about 58% remaining. So we're a little bit ahead right now, which is good. Part of that is because some of the expenditures haven't been recognized yet. Some are one-time expenditures, but not that many. A lot of this is going to be timing based on the hiring of the additional staff, which was in the budget. There's some time lag for that, so that may give us some built-in savings. But I'll be doing a really strong 6-month analysis of budget to actual for our next meeting. So that'll tell us where we're really at. Take a look at like some estimated accruals, see if the accruals are making that big of an impact that it would make it look like we're so far ahead of where we had budgeted.
And I think as far as the rest of the reports, I think it behooves us to look at these before the meeting whenever possible, so that if we have some specific questions, we can jump out with them. They're new to us, and I think we just take a minute now and look through them, see if there's anything that anybody'd like an explanation. And, next time we can be a little more prepared, because we'll have some idea, we'll have these to look back, and let's just throw it out at that point right now.
I had a
whatever.
comment to make on that. I was wondering, it looks like these were transmitted to us like Friday afternoon, this last Friday, for us to review for today's meeting. Is there a way we could have these transmitted at an earlier duration of time so that we could have maybe a week to review them? Is that possibly?
We were trying to get them posted on Thursday.
Okay.
But I had some difficulties with the treasurer's report. It would not balance for the life of me, but then I finally found it, and that's why it was Friday. And Nicole and I had talked about it. She was thinking she was going to post all of it except for that report Thursday, so you'd have it, but I don't think she got the opportunity to do that. But we try to get it to you as soon as we can. It's hard because timing-wise and having the ability to generate the reports and everything. But I have been trying to do that. As we get more caught up to where we're like more consistently on top of things, we should be able to generate these with a little more cushion.
To give us a little bit more time up front, based upon, these are going to be growing reports. I think as time goes by, we're going to be looking at more detail.
Right. Plus, we'll get it a little more consistent. So at some point, as we get comfortable with these and we're rolling, I should be able to get them done a little bit quicker.
Great.
So.
And I think as time goes on, we'll recognize some of these categories or some of these line items don't matter. We'll understand that the what we expect to collect from other entities as a pass-through aren't going to tie with the expenses, but we'll recognize that, and some of those things will not have as much interest to us. Other things that we're not seeing now will become much more important. But at this point in time, we have something to start with, and certainly a whole lot better than what we've seen before.
Mm-hmm. And it gives us the ability to move forward. And as we move forward, if we start identifying that there's something that the committee wants to look at in detail each time, it's easy enough to then add that to the list. It's totally flexible for that. Mm-hmm.
Quick one. After reviewing this this morning, the report, I just have a. You mentioned about the doing a budget thing on the every 6 months or something. Is it possible so we could constantly could glance at, especially on my side, I could pinpoint right away, say, we're in line, doing a quarterly budget, because we're the way I see it in here, you got the up to September. That's excellent. The only thing is we're seeing the budget of the whole year, and then you're planning it to do it at 6 months. Can you break it down to every quarter, every on that side, so we could see the we do accrual on that side. I do understand that. I don't have problem with that. I could identify that on my side. Okay, I just like to see, if we compare apple to apple, this will be a good comparison, September to a budget of September.
Right. And the idea is that we do something more detailed on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
Just kind of behind the 8 ball, trying to get things scrambled and up to date. So what I had done for council at 9:30, just to give them a comfort that, we are still looking at it, at 9:30 we did do internally we did a pretty good look at where are we. I included that for this committee as well, so you could see it. And then at the mid-year is when we will be doing a detailed review with budget adjustments where necessary. And then again, at March, we're going to look at it again. So it is, I intend for that detailed review and any adjustments to be done on a quarterly basis. I don't want to wait and do it at 6 months. Really don't want to wait and only do it at the end of the year. That doesn't really help matters. So,
That's good.
Yeah.
And then a comment on your notes and everything after reviewing it, me reviewing it. And then I saw your notes in there, and that answered all my questions in there.
Good.
Because you know what, there's 189,000 or you know difference in there. But if we go on the quarterly basis, maybe we could say, hey, you know, there's an accrual coming in here. Maybe another 2 months we will get the money.
Right.
And whoever reviewing it will understand that there's a transition or in transit
Right.
transactions in there.
Right, that there's always timing to be considered. There's
That's
just
correct.
always timing. So I tried to do that with the 930 only because that's a lot of information,
Yeah.
and the council and this committee really hasn't gotten a lot of financial information up to this point. We've been working on getting it organized,
Yeah.
really, and getting everything in place. So as much information as I can give you, I think will help you kind of know where we're at. And it gives you a good baseline going forward. Certain situations should occur exactly the same every year. And so it should become something where you would expect to see it. And so it should be there, and that comment should always be there as well. So
Very good.
anything weird, anything that, timing wise needs to always be considered, I want to make sure I give you those notes. It helps. There's so many numbers to look at and so many ways to break it down. Just little notes.
I think it's important at this point in time to recognize that this committee has been working with Audit more and trying to get in place something that will give us and the city council and the citizens some basis to work from that's consistent from period to period and year to year. And we're now dropping into the point that our focus will probably change more to finance, and we'll actually have numbers that we can look at. And I just popped something off here: sell a property, sell a motorcycles. Okay. At this point in time, we're excited that we actually can record that there was a sale of motorcycles and find it. But I think as we move on now, we'll be looking at, oh, the city sold motorcycles. Well, why? And I think it's important to note that that's coming. And that may be something that the citizens would like to see as being done, but at this point in time, we're just getting to where we can do that. That's going to be exciting for all of us, I
Right.
think.
We're getting our toes in the water now.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
Well, then, I think we're probably through with those for now,
Okay.
which
And
then
we'll
moves
have
us.
the next ones next month. Like I said, the intention is every meeting I keep up with them so you get the next month or the next quarter. And so we do all that reporting consistently at every committee meeting.
And we may need to take these home over the next month and look at these so that when we see next month's, the questions or the concepts that we need explained, we can do. And of course, we do have a timing issue. Anytime when you're talking accounting, the thing I love not working in accounting anymore is first 3 days of the month, you go crazy trying to get everything in. The committee, we don't have that that luxury. We're not plugged in for 40 hours a week doing this, but we'll go from there.
I just have a question for you, Milana.
Sure.
Some of the funds on this cash
On
balance
the,
analysis,
yes, the treasurer's report. Yes, ma'am.
the cash balance, okay, you're calling this the treasurer's report, okay.
Oh, yeah, I guess it is the same thing. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Could you explain what some of these funds are and where these monies go or come from? I'm not as familiar with all the different funds as maybe some of you guys are.
Oh, sure. There's, we have a lot of funds, and sometimes it's a little confusing, absolutely. Of course, the big one is the general fund. That's just general operations. The two below that are in the same numbering sequence because general operations, those three really go together. The successor agency, that has to do with the redevelopment agency that the state said, oh, yeah, no, we want that back. So this is the last piece of that. It still sits. And there's a little bit of activity going on there where we're working with the state controller to try and get some of that loan reinstated. So that's still sitting there, but not with a lot going on. Self-insurance, that's where we actually track by individual litigation, every case, no matter what it is, whether it's for just a claim for workers' comp or if it's a bigger case, they're all tracked there by case. And then at the end of each month, we allocate it out and put it in the general fund in general terms. So we can track them by case for our insurance and risk, but we don't lose sight of how much it actually cost us. So that Fund 120 zeroes itself out because we move the actual activity at the end of each month into the types of categories it goes in. So workers' comp by different departments or by risk, other kinds of litigation in our risk department, things like that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so 120 is just where we capture the information at the front end so that we can track it by case. Highway users, that's gas tax, and that's used for our streets, potholes, that kind of stuff. It's transferred out and used there. Motor vehicle subvention, that one threw me. That's AQMD money. So we get just a little bit of AQMD money, and that can be used towards specific projects that the AQMD has in their list. So things like if we wanted to purchase a truck and it was going to be a low emission, maybe an electric truck or something, we could use these funds for that. It can also be used for things like once all the street lights are in place, having them timed so that you have all the green so that you don't have all the stopping. They allow you to use the funds for things, projects like that. PEG, Public Educational Government, that is some funds that we get, and it can be used for, say, our YouTube transmissions, for the equipment that's used in this office here in order to transmit it to the public. So if we had a cable TV network channel, then we could use it for that as well. Things like that. Grants, COPS, that is funding we get from the state for specific public safety programs. The asset seizures have to do with active federal and state criminal cases. And we get those from time to time, and it seems like there's been a little bit of an uptick with our canine, who's been used in several cases, so that we have seizures that now we're holding in trust for cases to be litigated.
Are these actually liabilities then, if you're holding those?
Some of them are, depending on the kind of case, and if it's multi-jurisdictional, then we hold it in a like a deposit fund. Yes. We have other restricted funds. We get little grants all the time here and there. We get some from like ambulance service. We get some from the recycling grant, just little ones here and there. Our community facilities operations, that's for services. That's the services piece, and also where I have deemed that it all will be collected when it comes in there, and then I can allocate it to the funds that it belongs in based on the county reports that we get. So that way, when they put the wire in and we show the big cash receipt, they have one place to put it, and then I spread it in like 65 different places. Our general capital projects, that ties directly to our CIP budget. Equipment replacement, that is some funding that was set aside years ago for specific equipment to be replaced. We're working on some research to see if there really was anything super specific that it should be spent on, or if we can use it for some of our capital projects. We have our Community Facilities District Capital and Future Facilities Fund. That's the PAYGO that everyone was concerned with. That is collected and it is tracked, and it's tracked by improvement area. And we've been using those funds. This last summer, we used them, whatever was available for specific improvement areas where we could do the bond refundings, the refinancings. We kicked all that money in order to bring that bond debt down. So
Things like prepayment fees that were submitted? Or
no, these
just
are
actual-
for, it's, you take the assessments when they come in and you say, this is the portion that is supposed to go to service and for maintenance. And this is the portion that's for debt service, and is there any left over? And the leftover then goes in this future facilities, which is then either used for capital projects or can be used to do the refinancings. We can throw it in and do debt buy down. Development impact, we have a generalized mitigation fund. There's a little bit in there for things that need to be cleared out, and then there's a really old fund for alleys that is sitting there, so that's what that is. And then all the other development impact fees that are paid by the developers are broken out between basic, general plan, traffic signal, railroad crossing, fire station, road and bridge, recycled water, emergency preparedness, regional park. We also now have TUMF, we have neighborhood park, we have public safety, and I'm forgetting something, but there's another one that's adding in there too. So all of those are impact fees that are paid by the developers as they get their permits pulled for the construction of new homes. We collect those fees. Each one of those has its own specific purpose that it can be used for, and we track those as well. They're also part of the CIP. If there's something that qualifies to be using some of these funds, that's then in the CIP budget and is transferred over. The MSHCP, that is strictly a pass-through. And what I've done is I've changed that to be a pass-through fund. So it's now MSHCP and TUMF, because both of those we collect from the developer and they are not ours, and they get transmitted to those two agencies on a monthly basis. Then we have the wastewater fund. One's operations, one is impact fees, and the other is capital projects related to the wastewater plant. And then we have transit. There's the transit fund and the transit capital projects. Transit also has an additional fund, but it's not reported here, and it's only for their pension accruals. We have to report them in a specific way to RCTC. So we have to keep those liabilities and assets straight. Then we have the bond management CFDs, and that is where we're holding funds either with the, well, in this case, this is pooled cash that is held towards debt service, either from prepayments by the community members. If you prepay your CFD taxes, it goes here because it's held in trust. And then it is transferred directly to the trustee. These numbers do not include what's held at the trustee. This is only the cash accounts of the city. The trustees, if you want to see those numbers, it's a different set of numbers. It's not on this report. So as the debt is paid down, we transfer money out of these bond management pooled cash accounts, and they're transferred over to the trustee. And if you see, it went from 17.5 million down to 5.9 million. That's because we transferred a lot of the money that was held in pooled cash over to the trustee for bond debt service, for the refundings, and also as we're identifying money that belongs with the trustee and not with the city, we've been moving that over as well. So the idea is to minimize the amount held by the city, maximize what's held by the trustee. And the last one is the evidence fund, and that's for if you get arrested and you have money in your pocket, we have to account for it, and it goes there, and we hold it in trust until your case is adjudicated, and then that tells us what happens. Either you get it back or you don't. So, but those are all the funds, and there could be more at any given time, but this seems like plenty to me. So it's a lot. I'm like, stop with all these funds. But yeah, we try to keep all of them straight. This is, like I said, this is just the total of the cash that's held in the bank accounts that are listed at the bottom, all reconciled balances of the pooled cash, the payroll account, workers' compensation account, which the workers' compensation account, the only way monies leave that account is through our third-party administrator. We do not have checks or disbursements out of that account. That's only done by the third-party administrator. We just reconcile it each month, and then we put money in it to make sure they can write their checks. The gas tax, because that's wired in from the state. Our construction funds, which is 2 projects right now. It's the Potrero interchange, and I'm sure I'll mess this up, but it's the one transfer from the WR-COG settlement for funds that we were supposed to set aside in a construction fund in accordance with the agreement, and we did that here. It could be, I keep messing them up. It could be Pennsylvania, it could be Oak Valley. I can't remember which one, but one of those projects that was specific, that's been transferred in there. That's why there's $10 million in that account. Our seizures and evidence funds, because those are held in trust and do happen at odd and strange times, that's been set aside in its own bank account. And then we have our general investment savings, which is in LAIF. And I make sure that the total of one equals the total of the other. So that is how I know I've accounted for all the cash funds.
Impressive.
Where is the TOT? Is that under the general? Is that
Yes, it is. It's a general fund.
in the tax section, right?
Yes.
Under taxes.
Yes.
General fund?
Well, on the CFD, we transferred the 3.1 million to the COP fund on this one here. I'll just look in on the report. There's a
Oh.
3 million in there.
Right.
We did transfer that.
We transferred $3 million from our capital improvement fund into the bond management fund. Yes.
And then there's a change in there, almost 6 million in there. That did we transfer that to the trust, to the trustees? There's a 6 million change. The net change on assets. On line item.
Oh, I see.
840.
I was like, what? Yes, that is for funds that went out to, came 21 out, change in assets. That was a decrease to, where did it go? Where did it go? Cash balance by fund. It's not going to tell me, is it? Because I was trying to remember why it made it look like the cash went up from a change in assets.
Okay.
And it went up because I had them all worked out when I was trying to make it balance. Because the only thing over there is the investments. So if cash went,
The 21 million is actually what was transmitted out, wasn't it?
right, that went over to the trustee.
Right.
That one I know. But my change in assets, most of those are because of accruals. And that could be the final assessment that was accrued, but it doesn't seem to me it was that high. So I cannot recall what it was that made it jump so much in the change in asset column. And I don't have it handy. But it's 850 and 840. It could be part of the transfers between the funds too, that changed that.
Would you like
Oh.
her to?
Oh, it's the repayment of the advance.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Right, remember there was the
The
5 million, right. Right, that's what it is.
Okay.
I'm thinking it's a big number, why can't I remember what that is? Yes, that's what it
Okay.
is.
So repayment of the 5
Right,
million.
of that,
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions on the reports? Okay, let's move to the next item, which is future agenda items. As we discussed earlier today, we're going to move to the next meeting, selecting a or a vice chair for this committee. Anybody else have anything they'd like to see on the agenda? In the
I'd
future?
like to interject, before you go to that, I have one more question.
Go for it.
Can we discuss a little bit the senior project? Because I noticed there's a proposed change to the budget based upon a change in construction versus original?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you mean from the 9:30 report that was there?
Right.
It seems that when the CIP budget was originally developed, that one of the numbers got dropped off somewhere in the middle, and that budget was wrong because that number, that one piece got dropped out, and I had to get it put back on in order to have the right budget for that project. It was originally done correctly, but as the CIP budget got revised forward before it went to council originally, one of the numbers got dropped out of it for some reason.
That's
So
quite a substantial
it was.
change in cost. The question I had is when I first started getting involved late last summer, there was discussion going on, because I think there was some relationship in some way or another to the 8th Street project where they were doing improvements on sidewalk and other improvements in there. And at one time, I think there was a proposed change order for $85,000 to do some extension work on Xenia Avenue.
Xenia,
And
yeah.
it got brought off calendar. And then was this a new project or a new, that was developed after that, just inclusive for Xenia, just for that area?
Well, the whole project was to have the whole street redone. So the change, though, doesn't have anything to do with the change in the work. It was just a correction of the budget. Because the budget ended up with the wrong numbers when it got presented to council. It was just picking up a lost estimate that was in there.
But is that an awarded contract that was based on earlier to that contractor?
For the full amount, yes. It was already awarded
Already
for the
awarded,
full
just
amount.
a correction based upon the reconciliation with
Right.
the contract amendment.
Right. When I started putting all the budgets in, and I thought, that's not what that's supposed to be. And then we went back, and one of the numbers got dropped out before the final budget got to council.
Would this committee be interested in the sewer treatment plant fee increase discussion that's going on? Do you think we need to have any kind of information or update on proposed fees and the extensions and everything else that's been reported?
I think, first off, let's just comment that was a good catch. Those kind of things this report are supposed to help us do and understand. I think the sewer, I remember sitting in a city council meeting and a presentation that was made. It was pretty darn clear at that point in time. But I think our input on that is just to advise the city council if those numbers make sense. We certainly aren't going to have any input as to whether or not it's needed, fair, or politically correct. Am I outside the scope of what you're thinking?
Well, I'm thinking, I'd like to know how they derive some of the numbers.
Yeah, that, I can't remember what meeting it was, but they had a couple of consultants here put on an excellent.
I think they're gonna do that for the community presentations as well.
Yeah, I think some of it's being represented at that time.
Yeah, okay.
Which
That was very worthwhile, and are they going to redo it? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I believe at the outreach meetings, I think they have 2 scheduled, and I believe that those same materials are going to be presented again with then answering questions and maybe presenting a few things a little differently, maybe structuring it different for understanding.
Yeah, because I remember they were like talking about some options, maybe deferring some of the increases because some of the need won't be for down the road.
Right.
Or do you want to collect it up front and have it available so when the need occurs, you don't have to go
Right.
back out? I mean, there's all these kinds of little
My
decisions. that have-
recollection was that was very understandable, but covered very well in depth, and it also illustrated where those fees are in relationship to similar sized cities with similar needs. And I think that was covered very well.
I think if I'm correct, I may be wrong on this, but wasn't it more related to new development, that existing account holders were not going to be impacted by the additional cost?
Yes.
Commitment for new development only?
Yes,
So if you were an existing resident with an existing infrastructure was not part of that upgrade and the new additional increase in fees, I think it was related more towards, I don't know on that for sure. I got
No, I'm remembering that too. We can ask.
No, if you go for a fee increase, you're gonna go across the board. You're not.
Right, it is, I believe it's across the board for a fee increase, but they were minimizing it, and I believe that it was that the larger portion of increase went into the developer impact fee side, so the developers were paying the bulk of that on the front end.
That's true. Right, that's true.
That's where the new developer,
Yeah.
Right.
But as far as the residents are concerned, you know, the cost of that is going up. And it did go up a couple years ago pretty dramatically.
Yeah, I want to say it was 5 years ago, there was some study and there was like an incremental increase each year.
Yeah, right, so it's gone up quite a bit and it's gonna continue to go up again with this proposal. I personally am for it because, I mean, you can't exist without sewer, and I mean, your development can't exist without sewer, but, I'm not questioning the consultants or anything like that, but I've done a lot of research over the years on sewer treatment plants. And in the last 20 years, the technology has increased drastically in terms of how they put these things together. And because of that, the costs have come way down. So I want to make sure that we're taking advantage of all those technological advances and changes, and that we get the best bang for our buck if we go and expand this plant. Because we have an old plant, and if we go and expand the old plant and with the old technology and everything like that, your costs they're gonna continue to go up, obviously, and maybe there's some opportunities to take a look at redoing the whole thing, and over a period of time, be a lot more cost effective with the new technology. I don't know if that's, I've not been privy
They're
to
putting in the
discussions, so
brine
I'm not
line.
sure if that's.
Brine is that's the whole
brine.
final piece. But I know that they're doing something with the new technology, because I don't understand it, and that's good because I'm an accountant and I don't really want to understand it. But I know they're talking about ultraviolet and extra sifting screens and treatments and all these. So it sounds like they're taking advantage of some of the newer technologies that they can add to existing facility as much as possible, which is good in my mind.
Yes,
But
well, I think, hopefully in these meetings, public meetings and stuff that they do have, that this is brought out, because I think that's a very important piece to this whole puzzle. I don't mind paying more money if it's smart. I mean, it's a smart thing to do, but I don't want to be paying just to fix an old problem that will continue to be an old problem, so.
once all of it has been settled and the direction has been given and things are happening, then this committee may want to have detailed project accounting for that specific thing to review on a monthly basis.
That's a good idea.
We could
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, let's add that.
Okay.
Okay, and anything else anyone would like to see on the future agenda?
Now, on Potrero, way back when, there was developers who were gonna put money up into a pot, and that was accomplished.
It certainly was. They
Yes.
did. And that's part of the $10 million in that construction fund. I believe 7.9 million came from the landowners and developers of that area.
And so that got the thing off the ground, okay.
It did.
yeah, the question I had on that, and I'll see if I can do more research offline, is that was for phase 1 and 1A, I think is what I was watching be approved.
Correct.
At the last, which lends me to think there must be more phases to the project overall. Is that the majority of the scope of the project?
I think that's the majority. I know there's a phase 2, but I'm not 100% sure what that is. I don't know if that's like an expansion of then what's there, or if that's like, in 8-10 more years, then it would require an additional phase 2. I'm not sure of that, but I know that there is a phase 2 in the background. But I think 1 and 1A gets it built and in place with the bridge, and the whole, everything is
Isn't it-
ready to roll.
Basically, what's being done now is the bridge and the interchange,
Mm-hmm.
but from my driving down there, the road goes down a few hundred feet and basically ends.
Right,
And
right.
so I guess that's a question, is what's gonna happen down the road with that?
Maybe, see, I don't recall, but I know that there's also discussion, tell me if this makes sense, of connecting to 4th Street? So maybe that's part of phase 2?
There's a whole grid set up for that Potrero interchange, and phase 1 gets the off-ramps and on-ramps and the bridge built. Phase 2 gets the connecting
Okay.
roads and everything put in there, so.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I need.
All right, and then we just need the treasurer's monthly finance and audit committee report to council.
Yeah, I'll just be saying that we continue continue the appointment of the vice chair due to the attendance of the meeting. That we looked at the Finance Department Policies and Procedures Manual, reviewed those, and Milana will be presenting those to council next week, at the next meeting. We looked at the internal controls again, and we received, reviewed, and filed those. We looked at the SEO status and update, which we looked at many times. And then we went over the financial reports and discussed those. And that's pretty much it, except for future items. Does anyone have anything to add?
Okay, looks like we're through. We can adjourn at 7:33. Thank you for coming. Next meeting scheduled for Monday, February 5th.